Right. What Maui Snake? Speaking of the aforementioned lawners / community response, what is your bad point?
Well, I changed. Okay, the order I did bad and ugly is different now because of the latest news. No. Just hear me out. You'll get what my ugly point is after. No, the bad point is the recent news that just came out right before we started this podcast. The JKS being benched.
You just said that was going to be your ugly one.
No, I'm moving this one to bad, and then the other one that was my bad is now my ugly. Okay, my bad. Okay. Just hear me out. Hear me out though. Okay, the JKS move is obviously bad given what we know about the rumor right now that they're looking at Nexa to possibly replace him. That just seems like the most whack part of this. I'll speak of this first in isolation before we even stick Nexa into the equation here. But to take out JKS to me is such a huge oversight in terms of I don't know if like somehow Nico coming back to G2 after turning down Falcons, like he came back to G2 and was like, I'll rejoin you guys, but only if you get rid of JKS. I'd be like, what are you talking about? Like, you don't, because we also talked about the whole thing with, Hooksy's playing with different tools than Alexi B was when he's playing with G2. The fact that instead of Jax and Alexi B, it is now Hooksy and JKS. And I know a lot of people want to give Hooksy a lot of credit because of what he's doing, and people are saying he's basically doing it with the same roster. He's able to accomplish what Alexi B couldn't. Well, JKS is a huge improvement over Jax, and even though JKS hasn't captured necessarily any of the MVPs for G2 in some of their crazy runs this year, I mean, his numbers at some of these big events were insane. And at Katowice especially earlier this year, he put up a 1.24. Like, he actually, of all the people on G2, I'm pretty sure he had the best overall rating for that team. It's just that I think I don't even know, like, come playoffs, maybe, like, they thought that some of the numbers for the other people, like Hunter, were better. I mean, I did think that actually, when I think back of that grand finals, Hunter was insanely good. He was bringing back a lot of, like, man deficit situations for them and whatnot. But I mean, it goes without saying that JKS, role for role, is one of the strongest in the scene right now. Like, as an anchor position, a lurker, he's obviously not ROPS in some of these lurk positions, but he's pretty damn good. He's pretty damn consistent. He's not a hindrance to the team by any means. And so then bringing in the other side of this, that they're bringing in Nexa, is just so confusing to me. That to me is where I definitely just had to put this in bad, because if you had a replacement in mind that somehow was better than JKS, like, for example, if FaZe is actually getting torn apart, if they're actually able to get ROPS into the same positions as JKS, I would say I would have a different opinion of this one. But as it stands right now, the rumor is Nexa, and I'm just confused. I just don't understand that at all. We obviously know that with Nexa and G2 in that old lineup, I mean, they were able to get to the grand finals of the Stockholm Major, but that's quite some time ago. And since then, Nexa's just been kind of toiling on OG, no real results of note. As an individual, I think he's just been all right, but he hasn't even been playing as strong of opposition as JKS is. And so it seems like they're replacing a player who, I wouldn't say he's a star, but he was a very sufficient and solid anchor lurker piece in JKS, with a guy that I guess is going to be secondary calling behind Hooksy. Like, there has to be some other kind of move here, or else this is just flat out bad.
Jump in.
It's just like the worry for me is I feel like the Nico coming back into G2 and then Nexa coming in is almost like you said. It's almost like, I'll come back to G2, but I want Nexa back, because apparently Nico sees something in Nexa that we don't, and for whatever reason that is even better than JKS, which I think, like you said, is patently untrue at this point. He's been out of the limelight as a player for going on 2 years now, since that major finals performance at Stockholm, and it almost reminds me of the old. There's something in, like, quite old Return to By the Numbers, the President for Life Nico concept, where he surrounded himself. Once he cut Kerrigan, he surrounded himself with, like, yes men, and so he's like, I'm the dictator for life. Anyone who disagrees with me gets killed. And I was really worried back before they got Alexi B that they were going to get Emmy as their IGL, because he, Pekka became the GM. He has, his cousin, so he's building like he's building like the dictatorship around him of his, Serbian supporters. And so Nexa coming in almost feels like a move of comfort for Nico as the dictator of this team, reasserting himself as the leader. And so you kind of have to think if that's actually true, which it's more of like a fan fiction conspiracy theory for me, harkening back to the old days of FaZe. But like you said, if Nico's secondary calling, maybe Nico as a precondition coming back is like laying the theoretical framework for HooXi to be out of the team. And he wants to experiment with Nexa as the IGL because he sees something in Nexa we don't. But even then, that is worrying to me because I don't think Nexa can really be the IGL of a team of this caliber and succeed.
The problem with this one is I actually do think that it must be related to Nico, because the idea this move comes right on the heels of him deciding not to join Falcons, and then he signed this guy. Like, there is another angle, which is, people might not know, the GM of this team, that Pekka guy, is himself Serbian and is thick as thieves with all the... If you don't know, it's not a meme. Unlike, actually, the stupid angle where you all saw a bunch of videos of Monacy and Jax and Monacy and Nico, and you all think they're best friends. No, the joke is, like, Nexa, Nico and Hunter are all good pals and are the sort of people who like to hang out at an event, and there is the Serbian crew of them and Janko and Kasad and all who'd always be at the event, etc. The problem that I have with this one is it does just scream nepotism. It just sounds like they just thought, like, because here's the thing, I don't think they're analysing it like actually in the game stuff, M&Ms. I think they're really just doing it like, the boys, like, but if we played together, it's the sort of conversation you have at like 1 a.m. in a bar with your friends, but then you don't really wake up the next day and do it. Like, you go, oh, let's just get a fucking van and just fucking drive, man. It'd be sick. Like, and then, like, by Sunday, who knows where we're at? You don't really then wake up, like, there's a Doug Stanhope bit I'm doing here, at like 8 in the morning the next morning to come outside like, beep, beep, like, what, you haven't got your stuff ready? Like, we're going in the van. Like, that was a fucking crazy idea at 1 a.m. Like, you don't really go and do that. So I think this is an example of whether or not he called the shot explicitly, this is why I made that whole thing about Nico. It is funny how if he doesn't, all the things that seem to be what he wants to happen just manifest around him. What has he figured out? The secret TM or something? What a fucking... This guy's vision board must be fucking bonkers. Shame you didn't put a major trophy on there. Well, then again, the joke is, maybe you did, but you put like a real major trophy, and then that blast one was obviously some shot of a Kinder Egg, so you wrecked yourself on that one. The other thing I would say...
I don't want to worry you here, but we can know what problems starting to develop if at the next LAN we see like Kassad slowly walking into frame with like G2 and he's like, hey, and like Nico invites him to the throne, invites Swanee to the throne room. He's like, hey, I want to have a quick meeting with you. And we just never see Swanee again. And Kassad's, announcing G2's Kassad, and it's just the Serbian mothership. And then like Yanko comes in as an analyst.
Because by the way, what you're saying there is, though, there's more circumstantial things you can add in, mate. Like, I'll tell you something that was really disturbing that now I'm suddenly getting mad PTSD remembering, which is at the end of the lineup, now we talked about when they had Nexa and the lineup with Amanek and Jax, that famously, right before they did get Alexi B, Hunter made this really weird interview statement where it was the headline, and he said there won't be any roster moves. So that was what Hunter, and spoiler, that means Hunter and Nico, that's what they wanted, was no roster moves. So that means they wanted Nexa to stay. And if you remember, they were even at the time floating the idea, maybe Hunter just becomes the IGL and Nexa stays. Like, these were two things they were putting out there themselves, like directly as players into the space. So I actually get the vibe, dude. There might be a world where it's like G2 themselves. Look, I know Carlos himself had a lot to say in the Alexi B lineup. There might be a world where essentially G2 was like, no, we want you to try this org. And then now that's part of why Nico comes back. It's like, right, but I want to go back to like an org with the Serbian guys I want to play with, which by the way, the problem is just as an analyst, it just doesn't sound like an interesting lineup. It just sounds a bit whatever, doesn't it? Like, and quite frankly, it just sounds worse than the last lineup.
He's the voice of Hunter's the voice of Sauron. He comes out and he says, HooXi will not be killed. And then it's like, HooXi has been moved to the bench, and we've had a fantastic time with him. And introducing Nexa will be the IGL, and we've added our good friend, like, Emmy, or I don't know.
Well, the thing is, at least Hunter has the, he has the sort of like the demeanor for it, doesn't he? He's a really amiable guy. As with Nico's like, shut up, everyone, bring him in now. Release the prisoner, JKS. Like, he just fucking do that when he just set the Dobermans off after him. The only thing is, though, on the JKS angle, I have to talk about this. This is one of the worst roster moves I think I've ever seen in Counter-Strike. Just the history of Counter-Strike. This is bad for everyone involved. Like, it's terrible for JKS, by the way. He will never be in this insane a position. Unless he's joining fucking FaZe right now, he is not going to be in this position. Like, he gets to be, on paper, the fourth best player. But as Maui pointed out, essentially, to me, he's comparable to Rain. He really can also, every now and then, be the MVP of the event or just do like a 1.18 rating, while you've got 3 guys who frag out of control. Like, that makes your team OP as fuck, because they also, like Rain, fit their role. Like, they're both doing the role of the shitter player who can't frag out, and then they're just giving you, like, unfair advantages where sometimes they do just carry the rest of the team. Like, this actually, by the way, if Nico was at all involved with this move, like it's JKS goes, bro, you just don't know Counter-Strike. I'll just say that straight up. Like, you have a different, like, me and you don't even exist in the same universe. It's like, to me, I'm watching Counter-Strike and you're watching, like, I don't know, fucking Hearthstone or something. I don't know what you're seeing in the game, because, like, this is one of the more, like, if I had to give, like, fucking support player of the year or role player of the year, fucking JKS would probably be like, it's him and Rain are just contending for it. Like, it's not even anyone else in the discussion at this point in time. Maybe Madden. It's like those 3 names are about it, right? So I don't get it as well. And then also, the part I find so crazy is, this just implies the rest of the team went along with this too. So when they were winning all those tournaments, and this is why I hate fucking star players when they take too much control. In my opinion, as a star player, you take control in this, and it's like, I want really good players. But you don't, like, think you're the GM and run the whole squad. And here's why it sucks. Because they really do, by the way, lose a tournament, like pick up the major. And instead of going, Nico, you had a pretty bad last game. Modesty, you kind of fell off a bit. They just go, we need more fraggers. And you just kick out, like an HLTV forum noob, you kick out the worst fragger and just bring in another one. Like, I've made this analogy a million times. It would be like having a fucking football team and just having like 6 strikers in it. If you then go, we're still not scoring enough, get another striker. No! Get strikers that work, and then functional players that do the other roles, you idiot. Like, I don't, like, essentially, what I would spin back to anyone in G2 is this. What did JKS do to warrant this move? Like, I can't comprehend what this is. Like, it's not even like I can even remember ever him, like, having a really big pivotal game where he shit the bed. Like, I don't think it's ever even happened. He's had games that haven't been good, but, like, that's the other thing. Eye test wise, it wasn't just numbers. He was just doing his job fucking amazingly. And also, you know, another thing that's mad underrated is he also will just win you random 1vx out of nowhere for no reason whatsoever. So he also, like, simultaneously had fragging, and he fits the role, and he gives, like, sort of a Zipnix component. Like, what more at this point, Nico, what do you want? Does someone just have to have, like, a Serbian passport? Is that the only way they're allowed to be in your team? I don't get it, mate. I don't get it. It's such a weird move to me. It's so bizarre. In fact, the only angle I could see for this that wouldn't make it terrible, and to be fair, we're doing this video and we don't know, like, what's going to, like, we don't technically know who replaces him yet. Now he's just going off what we're speculating on. The only angle that would make this make sense is if it turned out it was actually like JKS wanted to leave and he was going to, like, FaZe. Unless it's that, I think this move's terrible. If G2 initiated this, I think it's one of the worst moves ever.
The top to bottom nepotism that seems more likely here is really what seems like this could kind of, in a way, have a cascading effect where G2 just becomes less and less competitive.
Dude, even the way this comes forwards, it's like, bros, you're not beating the nepotism allegations when you do your moves like this, are you? Like, the timing's terrible in it, I know.
Yeah.
We don't have enough firepower. I think I know a guy for the job, and then just, like, Nexa walks in and you're like, Poopsy's like, oh, I'm so fucking dead. Like, it's so over for me.
Also, am I just missing something? It's not like Nexa was... Here's the one thing. If he'd sat on the shelf and they just know secretly he's really good still... I saw him in OG. It was fucking terrible. Like, I like the guy as a person, but it was that was a non-starter from the beginning to the end, and it wasn't actually that big a surprise to me, unfortunately, that they benched him. Like, as far as I can tell, he couldn't frag or IGL. Neither was working out, so I don't get it. Like, unfortunately, this is why, I mean, I'll just say it this way. You can't complain if you're people like the Pekka guy or Nico that we're speculating this, because you haven't given us a plausible reason that you've done this move. That's your issue. Like, it doesn't make any sense in the server, doesn't make any sense outside the server, unless this one angle becomes involved. And if it isn't, then, like I say, you've fucked up the messaging, because it looks like that's the problem. The timing is too bad with the Nico story. That makes it look like it has to be like this.
You know, like when a team like Liquid, for example, got Patsy and Rainmaker, at least they had like Daps and Joka Steve come out and like lay out like a thesis.
Yeah, fair play for that. Yeah,
they got out the whiteboard. They said, like, this player, you know, Daps is a skilled talent scout, and they're like, no, Nex is just the Minister of Agriculture now, and you just have to deal with it. You know, he's the minister. Oh, he's also the Minister of Defense now, and yeah, it's definitely a bad point. Like, I don't see any way, unless like JKS is going to Falcons or something. I mean, like, if JKS ends up just sitting on G2's bench for 6 months, it's going to be such a loss for the scene.
I mean, the obvious joke here is there's just obviously some really fucking idiosyncratically specific Serbian way of making his coffee that Nico likes. See more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, you know, be a pleb and don't. Right, here's my bad point. It's actually, that's the thing. Technically, some people we'll see where Maui goes on this one. Technically, I'm encroaching on his livelihood. But I don't do these events, mate, so I don't have to give a fuck. How fucking whack is it that we're back to online tournaments being like a real part of the scene? Where we're watching an online tournament and we're like, and this person's the MVP. By the way, they will never on Liquipedia ever actually make that tiered system visible. Everyone in history will always just go, he has 17 MVPs. Like, I want to know who has the big event MVP. I don't care if you won like a small land with 4 teams years ago, you know. So the problem with that one is, we're doing this thing where everyone just pretended like it was 2020 again during that Thunder pick thing. Like, oh, well, they're back. And, oh, wow, they're winning this team. Oh, wow, what's going on with this team? And the whole time I'm just thinking like, look, I get that if nothing's going on in the week, it's cool that there's a tournament, but this isn't part of the circuit for me. Like, the circuit's lands. Like, I already have had to accept that the land circuit will never be as big. Like, we're never going to actually have it where there's like 4 lands a month. It's going to be like 1.5 months for each tier 1 land. I get that. But the idea, like, in the meantime, we're doing online tournaments and then we're pretending they all count again. It's like, really? Who gives a shit? Does anyone actually, are we all pretending it's 2020, we just care about online tournaments again? Do we really? I don't, at least. I don't.
I care about them in so much as if they are paying me to care for them. But
that's not a bad reason to care. Yeah.
Because as a freelancer, I mean, I'm not really beholden to having to respect that tournament unless I'm on their payroll, and I'm not on their payroll. So I don't think, like, the Thunder Pick and Rubet things are just like, yeah, I mean, I feel like they're just supposed to be something that fills the time between events, and in a fun way for the players, I guess, you know, they get to relax at home a little bit. Probably that hopefully will mean that we don't hear as much about like travel complaints and stuff like that from them, because even though they were competing in that time, it was from the safety of their own homes. So yeah, I don't really like, I think Rops won the Thunder Pick one, for example, but I'm not really like, that doesn't vault him to some other status this year for me whatsoever. I barely really take too much from it. I kind of like watching when people like Fizzico and Art out here put together all the cool plays that people are doing in these online cups. I think that's actually, honestly, I think that's more interesting than anything. It's like, oh, people are test running all of these cool little tactics and strats, and this is a good time of any to try them to see, is this actually viable here, or is this something that we're going to scrap before the actual real big events come back? And yeah, I would even consider, like, I know, look, like Kassad loves to throw around the Banana Cup term, but like, you know, compared to like a fall finals or whatever, this doesn't really mean that much to me. Like, it's just so, and what's crazy is that the prize pool that they're throwing into these is actually pretty absurd. Like,
oh, it's amazing. Like, yeah.
VP just collected $250,000 total from both the Rubet and Thunder Pick events, and it's just like, that's going to look so good at the end of the year, and it's going to look freaking good on these Valve rankings, which is also one upsetting thing, that the Valve rankings, given that it's off of prize money, I don't know what the multiplier is necessarily for LAN versus offline, but having huge online events with giant prize pools has such a huge effect, from what I remember reading about how that ranking system was graded, and that's obviously going to affect, you know, people that are going to the RMR or skipping the close qualifiers. And yeah, I think thankfully for our sake, the teams that did pretty well in these events were teams we would have expected to do well in LAN events, but that doesn't really change the fact that that's not always going to be the case.
So technically this tournament did actually count towards people, I know it's miles away, but like potentially qualifying to the RMR, because it affects your ranking.
I mean, the formula is open source. You can look at the formula and see how much it counts for. I don't think any of us have, you know, gone to the trouble of looking at it. You would hope it's not too big, but I will say Valve has been pretty receptive of people's sort of critiques of their ranking system, and because it's transparent, like, for example, they recently changed the weighting system for a team to get onto the rankings. It went from 5 matches to 10 matches, and that was something that I believe some player in NA was complaining about, because like a random mixed team made it up there. I think maybe it was Sponge's team from like some show match that made it on there.
Okay.
Or no, it was Pimp's team, right?
Oh.
Pimp's team, yeah. And it was like number like 35 in Europe because they won like a show match. But and once the Valve fixed it, it fell off of the ranking table. So they are receptive. So you could see a world in which Valve is like looking at the state of the scene and they're like, yeah, there are too many online events, and they just decrease the weight. Yeah. I know it's crazy to say, but I think we are entering a good era for Valve where they are actually more receptive to these things than ever before. We see them making patches that are related to like what players' complaints are. We're seeing them make adjustments to the rankings based on what the community feedback is. It's not perfect, but I think there is room for this to be fixed and not potentially affect the major cycle too much. But yeah, these online events are just so. They've replaced the DreamHack Opens, they replaced Star Ladder events, they replaced sort of these tier 2 events where teams would really get their start and get experience. I know from as an NA sort of obsessed person, when I saw like, oh, Wildcard and Nouns and all these NA teams are going to, Europe, they've qualified to Thunder Pick World Championships, and it's just on an event. Oh, they're just playing from their boot camp. Never mind. Don't care. The experience is not that valuable for them. They can play as much online as they want to. In fact, they play too much online sometimes to the point where they have no LAN experience. And then, final point, you did say like, oh, I hate that the Liquipedia guys, they did the thing with the MVP.
It's accurate.
You do the right here, direct all complaints, in my general direction. Like we can build a better Liquipedia if you just complain louder. Like, okay. I promise you. Because I know
all it needs is a tweak. Just do like an overall one, then do like big events, MVPs, and then something like that, or color code.
You're talking about the top
yes.
10 thing, right?
Yeah.
We have decreased the weight of online events before, especially during COVID, because we're like, this is stupid. When a team has like 3 CCTs in there, and you're like, okay, like obviously, like no one cares, but because we did, you may not know this. The thing about back when it was called Premier Major Minor, and you made that video, that's why it changed.
Oh, fair enough.
Fair enough. S tier, A tier, B tier.
Yeah, if people don't know, that's actually also one reason why it's not just called Player when I do it. Like on By the Numbers, for example, loads of industry people like ESL used to watch that. And I can tell you they have changed, like how they've done like seedings and things like that based on if you make good points. The problem is, though, I will just push back on one thing with the Valve thing, which is, even though you are totally correct in everything you say, I will just explain it this way, though. That ranking, how it began, was so insanely bad. That is like Valve was like, hey, I've done an art exhibit. And you're like, all you did is pull your pants down and shit all over the wall. And they're like, yeah, so what's wrong with that? And you go, try using a pencil. And you're like, but they are using pencils now, so they're starting to get proper artwork. It's like, well, you are right, technically, but they also did start the stupidest way possible.
Well,
and the worst thing about that, and by the way,
you says you can't polish a turd, but it has been proven you can polish a turd.
But here's the problem, mate. The real joke is this. I'll loop it back in. They actually, unironically, should get people like you who have worked with Wikipedia to tell them how to do these fucking rankings. Because what I hate is this. It's the notion that you had to launch your ranking to know it didn't work, right? If people don't know, almost every time a ranking's come along, Lurpus has preempted every time these exact problems. Like when ESL made that one where it was just based on like players having the points M&Ms. If you remember, I think Lurpus pointed out at the time when like Na'Vi had benched like Guardian, that if like Guardian just joined with like these other benched players, they wouldn't have played a match as a team, but they'd have already had like, the 38th best ranking in the world or something, because that was how they sit. If people don't know, like, you can do a dry run, and you can also just bring an expert and go, what do you think could go wrong with this? And then the idea is you give him the system, the formula, he puts in like, well, what happens if a team did this? And then we can actually get ahead of it. You don't have to wait until after the fact. We can actually fix some of these before. We just need Valve, as usual, to actually like ask for people's help, basically. Because I feel like we could get a very sturdy ranking going. I mean, it's already
the most frustrating, horrible thing ever was when they did the old RMR system where, you would play like 3 or 4 events before the major and they would aggregate the points and you would lose points, for making roster changes and getting penalties or whatever. They never published a public source for where those points ranking, like what the point rankings were. Ever. So Liquipedia, we had to basically reverse engineer their ranking system to give the public something to look at. We had, the table where it showed like who would qualify, who would not qualify, how many points have you lost, and we had to completely engineer that from scratch because Valve never published us. And we did eventually actually get into contact with them, but there would be times where we would message them and we're like, Valve, we think you're interpreting this. We think you've interpreted this rule wrong. This shouldn't, based on the actual wording of your rule book, it should be this. And then they're just like, oh yeah, good point, and just change it. So like they will change stuff, but it's also frustrating because like with that as an example, the way you qualified to the major was opaque, and you couldn't actually see which teams were qualified to the major if Liquipedia didn't make the table. And like honestly, I'm an idiot. I just write articles about CS teams disbanding or whatever. The actual developers at Liquipedia, like, I
mean, whoever does it, yeah, sure. But the point is, there's people who already can do all this.
And, like,
yeah,
code the tables, and they long
they
nights
could easily do it.
Like,
yes,
but it's like they are getting better by making it like transparent and open source and not having us smash our heads against a table because we can't tell if like a team's qualified to the major. But
Oh, and by the way, to bring it back, the other thing as well that you said there that I also agree with. Look, I get why for Thunderpick they want just the best teams in the world and they want to have it now and they don't want people to not participate who are on FaZe, for example, because it's a huge team and I'm sure it encourages the betting, etc. But actually, the other thing that's sad is I agree, it has also replaced essentially Tier 2 LANs. And the reason that sucks is even though the Tier 2 LAN wouldn't have this lineup, like some of those teams, maybe FaZe wouldn't attend, right? I don't care. Those Tier 2 LANs had real value because they actually did give you like some simulacrum of what a real LAN tournament's like. So the difference is if some like Tier 2 team went to that LAN like DreamHack, that was, if people don't know, there never was any real surprises in Counter-Strike. Like you're all going to be like, when Furia, Vanguard came out of nowhere, they didn't. They played in all the Tier 2 circuit. You can go watch all the LANs. What they actually did was gradually creep up and then break out at a big Tier 1 LAN. But the point is, if you didn't watch Tier 2, you didn't know they existed. But we did need that Tier 2 scene to build them all up and figure out who was actually good. If people don't know, even some of the ones in the online era, like the fucking Mad Lions of the world, came up through the end of that LAN circuit. Forza, all those teams did. So it's actually just a bummer, unfortunately, when you don't have that, because the online cop also doesn't work in that way. Like you don't get any LAN experience from that. You're still just playing from your bedroom, like the old meme with the Coca-Cola and your chair and all that jazz. So to me, it's okay as a filler, like you say, or I get why for the company they want to do it. It's totally fine. It's great entertainment. I just don't want it to be considered part of like CS history for me, because let's be real, everyone is just going to delete the online era. We all did that already, basically. Like, so we have to do it with this too.
Well, sitting here with the comfort of my Coca-Cola in my bedroom, what I will say is, like, think about, for example, like ENCE. ENCE's most important formative event to becoming a real team was DreamHack Winter 2018. If they didn't win that event, winner come in second place, I can't remember anymore. But that was like their event where they like finally hit the ground running. I think they beat like MSL's Optic at some point, and you're like,
oh, you mean Star Series? It was Star Series
Pardon?
At the end. It was Star Series Season 6 at the end of 2018.
No, there was the same matchup at a DreamHack Winter.
Oh, fair
too.
Enough. Okay.
Because I was on also with Bravodo, the South African guys.
Oh, could have been DreamHack Winter then. Okay.
And then Existence Galaxy, the team with Barbar on it. But that was like those two small lands were the formative events with them, and I don't think they would have been able to go on and do what they did at the major without that. And now you see these teams are playing like CCT online. You know, they're playing like 6 CCT online events at once, and it's like, is that really a valuable experience for these teams? And they're playing, you know, Swiss, which is not as a format we use at Common Lands. They're playing, you know, 5 or 6 matches a day, not something we do on LAN. So it's like completely, there's, you know, it's a simulacrum. There's no relationship to what real CS is like.
By the way, if anyone does go back, it was like over a year ago now when we did that episode with Heku. She actually nailed it, Maui. She pointed out that the problem with the CCT tournament was they immediately sort of threw the concept out the window that it was for regional teams and tier 2 and they just go for the biggest names ever and just ram them in all the... Because the maddest thing about that is, dude, it doesn't even make any sense what division you're in. I've seen teams like CCT North, and then it'll be like, I mean, obviously I don't want to talk about my house, but I've seen like Brazilian teams in that shit. None of them make any sense. They just think, like every fucking project, it was a good idea, then they sold out, right?
At one point, MIBR was playing, I think, CCT North Europe, CCT
there you go.
Central Europe,
it was.
and CCT South Europe all at the same time.
I mean, spoiler, they're from the fucking Southern Hemisphere, and they're putting CCT North. Like, you know,
they're not in Europe.
It's too good, isn't it? I know. It's too good.
Because the problem with that is it's all run by different tournament operators.
Yes.
So for them, the incentive is, why wouldn't
want the biggest name? Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Why would I invite, you know, the 3? If I'm CCT South Europe, am I just stuck to only invite like Albanian, Kosovar, and Serbian teams until I die? No, I want MIBR. Like,
right. What is your ugly point then? Oh, go on.
Well, just one last little thing about like the CCT and MIBR and all that stuff like that. If you actually look at the Valve rankings as they are most recently updated, this MIBR is the second highest standing team in the Americas region. They're above Furia, they're above Liquid, they're behind Complexity, who is just way above everybody else. But yeah, they just have so many points because they've just won random prize money from random tournaments that no one really is watching. But yeah, okay. Wait, who's ugly?
It's Jeff now. It's your ugly point.
The mini
this ties into it though. Actually does segue.
I'm still mad about CCT too, because Brazil is up to CCT South America Series 12. Europe is like 8, 9, 10. They've run 10 events there. Do you know how many NA got? 4.
One, I'm gonna guess. Oh, 4.
4. And then they said, and we asked, and we're like, why? Like Dusty Us, we went to the TO and we're like, like, why did they, is there going to be the next 4 you promised? Because each region, I think, was supposed to have like a round 8. And they're like, oh, yeah, there just wasn't enough, interest in the project. There wasn't enough viewership, da-da-da. So, yeah, you just only get 4 events. And it's obviously, and that affects our ratings, too. Because, like you said, like, MIBR is viewed as, like, the best team in the Americas because they're just running around Europe playing random CCT events.
They're winning like Brazilian CCTs, and they're winning Europe, or they're getting money from America. South American CCTs,
yeah. They honestly, like, a team like Zero Tenacity from the Balkans should just go to Brazil and play like one of their CCTs and be like, see, that's how it feels. Like,
see more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or be a pleb and don't.